Welcome back to part 13. I think it's part 13. Yeah, part 13, where we are building a trading robot in Python for the TD Ameritrade API library. So we're continuing on with our previous video. And so now we are really, I would just say, kind of in the meat of writing the main script that is intended to use the different objects that we've created. Now, I did want to let people know just a little bit before I get too much into this. I have gotten some requests to do some more videos, kind of more with the refined library, so the one that kind of has all the more functionality part of it. And so I will at some point be having videos that cover that particular library, just because I know as things change and things like that, it's kind of nice to have an example of using the library that's kind of more up to date. I still want to complete this series. I think this is a very important series to understand the logic behind the library, what it's intended to do, and the higher level ideas. But when it comes to actually using the library, I'm more than okay doing kind of a smaller series, maybe 1 or 2, 3 videos, something like that, where we're actually using it. We're not going through and like making sure this works, then jumping back to that, and stuff like that. So I'm more than okay doing that, just because I know it can be a little bit confusing, and this series is really geared more towards somebody who wants to understand the intricacies of the library and how it's working. Okay, so what we're going to do in this video is we're going to focus on two things. We want to be able to get historical prices, and we want to be able to take those historical prices and we want to put them into our stock frame object and create a stock frame. So in order to do that, we're going to need a couple things. We're going to have to import this wonderful stock frame object into our robot file. And then we're going to also have to define our grab historical prices method. So this is a template that we defined many videos ago, but we never actually wrote it. We're now going to fill this one out and along with this one. Maybe this video, if not this video, the next video, we will talk about creating a trade object and getting that ready to go. So that is ideally what we will cover today. And then in the next video, we will continue on defining some more functionality that will be part of our robot class and allowing us to pull quotes and check indicators. That's the next big thing. Okay, so first things first, let's do the easiest and import our stock frame object. So we'll do PyRobot, and then we'll do the stock frame, and then we will import our stock frame object just like that. And then from here, we're going to do a couple things. We will define our create stock frame method. So this one is pretty straightforward. All we're going to do is we're going to add one argument. That argument will be called data, and it will be a list of dictionaries. And so obviously, we've worked with the TD Ameritrade API before. We understand when we get historical prices, it is just a list of candles. And so we're going to take those candles and put them into a stock frame object. And so this is intended to return a stock frame object. Now, to actually do this wonderful method, it's not too complicated. All we're going to do is we're going to do self.stockFrame, so the attribute that belongs to our robot object. We're going to set that equal to a new instance of the stock frame object. We're going to pass through one of the arguments when we initialize it, which was our data argument. And that's just going to be the data that we pass through. That will create a new stock frame, and we want to return that stock frame back to the user. So we're just going to return the attribute itself. And just like that, we now have a method to create our stock frame. Perfect. Let's move on to the next one, which is grabbing historical prices, which is always a fun one. Let me move my notes really quickly. Where did I put it? Wait till next bar. There it is. Okay. Perfect. So next price, or historical prices. Okay. So this is a little bit more of a complicated one. If you've used my TD Ameritrade API library, you know there is a method in there that allows you to grab historical prices. This particular method references that. So right now it's a more simplified version of it. So in the sense of, I kind of assume some stuff behind the scenes. However, I am working on it. We will make it a little bit more dynamic, but I do want it to be a more structured one. So right now, for example, We are looking at a daily level, but it's going to be minute level data as well. So it's going to be like a period of a day with intraday minute level data. So again, over time, we will adjust that, but for right now, it's a little bit more static. So first things first is we're going to pass through or define our arguments. The first one will be called start. It will be a datetime object. We're then going to have end. That will also be a datetime object. And then we're going to have a couple other ones. One is going to be called bar size. This defines the size of your bar. So if I'm talking a 1 minute bar, a 2 minute bar, a 3 minute bar, a 1 day bar, a 1 week bar. So the size is kind of the numeric value. That's at least the way I like to think about it. It's always really hard with this one. I don't know why. I just can never wrap my head around it. And then we're going to have a bar type. So the type of bar is saying, is it a weekly bar, a monthly bar, a daily bar, or a yearly bar? So something that's kind of more from a time frame perspective, what kind of type of bar are we looking at? This will be a string and it will default to minute. So if you don't give me anything, I'm giving you minutes back. And then finally, we're going to have symbols. This is an optional argument. It is a list of strings, but it will also default to none. So this is a list of symbols, and what we're going to be doing is looping through those symbols. However, when we call this method, we're going to do a couple behind the scenes things. The first thing is we're going to store that bar size. That might be helpful down the road if we're having to do certain types of aggregations or things like that. Having that information beforehand makes our lives very easier, a lot easier. And then we're going to do the same thing for bar type. So we're going to create 2 new attributes. Those will store the arguments that are passed through. It's going to be useful down the road. Okay, and then from here, we need to convert our start and our end date time to timestamps, more specifically milliseconds. And so milliseconds since epoch. So we need to create a timestamp for the number of milliseconds since epoch. So luckily for us, somebody was very nice and contributed to the TD library, and they created a function that will convert a datetime object into the number of milliseconds since epoch. And then all you need to do is there is a datetime object argument, and then you just pass it through. So in this case, if I want it to be the start, I just return that back. And then I think, yeah, this one returns an int. So I have to convert it to a string because the API does expect it to be a string object. And then we have to do the same for the end datetime. And so it's milliseconds since epoch, and then it's the datetime object, and then end. And just like that, we are good to go. We are going to initialize a new list. It's a new empty list called new prices. This will be something where when we go through, we're going to loop through each of the candles, and we're going to kind of clean it up a little bit, just add an extra key basically, and then store it in this new list. Again, some people might ask, is this really necessary? I personally like doing it only because it gives us a nice way of kind of having this clean version. It doesn't mean we don't have to keep the old one, but a lot of times it's nice to have one that's already organized when we're starting to pass it to different operations. And then the first thing we're going to do is after that is we're going to check to see if any symbols were passed through. So if there weren't symbols, then what we're going to do is we're going to say symbols equals self.portfolio position. So if you do not give me a list of symbols, I'm going to assume you want to grab historical prices for each of the symbols in your portfolio. So very important to keep that in mind as well. Once we've done that, we're going to start looping through those symbols. So we're going to say for symbol in symbols, we're then going to grab the historical prices. So we'll create a new variable. We'll call it historical prices response. And then this will be self. We're going to go to our session object. And then we know there is a get prices history or get price history. This is using the TD API. This one has a lot of arguments. The first one is symbol. That's the symbol. The next one is the period type. Now for right now, I have this set to day, but I will be at some point making this a little bit more dynamic. And then the next one is the start date. This is the start argument that was passed through that has been converted to a timestamp. We have the end date. This is the end argument that was passed through. we have the frequency type. This is the bar type. And then we have the frequency. This is the bar size. And then finally, there is an optional argument that is called extended hours. Behind the scenes, I just put it always to true, so I'm always going to assume that you want extended hours. Again, at some point, I will allow you to specify that. Okay, and then from here, we're going to start doing our cleanup process. So the first thing we want to do is we do have an attribute that belongs to our robot object. It's called historical prices, and it is an empty dictionary. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a key to that dictionary, which represents the symbol, and that is going to be assigned to another dictionary. And inside that dictionary, we're going to add another key, and that key is called candles. This is the raw candle, so this is the one where we have not done any cleanup. I do store it there just in case people want it. And we take our historical prices response and we grab the candles key. So we have our candles, and then we start going through and looping through each of the candles, because now we're going to start cleaning up our candles. So the first thing we do is we take our candles, and we're going to start looping through it. We're going to initialize a new dictionary. So we're going to call a new variable, new price mini dictionary. And then we're going to take our new price mini dictionary, and we're going to start adding some keys to it. And a lot of these equal the old ones. And so we're going to say candle, and then symbol. So really all we're doing is we're just kind of reassigning. A lot of people might ask, why are you doing this? Is this necessary? Well, you look at it and you'd kind of say, it doesn't look like it, but there are certain things where it's kind of nice to have it. So for example, the candle doesn't actually have a symbol, so we can add that symbol to it. This becomes in handy when we're creating our stock data frame. And then we have a close. And then additionally, maybe potentially down the road, what we can start doing is we can start adding to these candles. So we can maybe do some other calculations, things like that, where even if you don't necessarily need it, it's going to be calculated for you. And we can call those like maybe extra metrics or stuff like that. Additionally, it does have timestamps. So maybe you might want those as actual date time objects just because they're a little bit easier to work with. So we at some point might be adding that in here as well, where it's an actual date time object, not necessarily just a timestamp. That can be a little bit more problematic. So we'll have new prices. And then what we're going to do is we're going to then add to that list. And we're going to say new price mini dictionary, and we're going to append it. And then from here, we need to this one. We need to take our historical prices, and then we're going to say aggregated, and then it's going to be new prices. Oh, this is a little bit too far out. Yeah, there we go. So we're just adding those clean ones into our historical prices, and it's called aggregated. So very useful. Okay, and then from here, I think that's pretty much it. I'm trying to make sure I have my notes just before I start throwing stuff back. I think, see, this is the problem, is I put it in here and then of course I moved it. You got to make your life hard, right? We'll just do this. We'll return the self.historical prices. So again, just returning it back to the user in case they need it. So now that we have this, let's start going through and actually leveraging the functionality, because that would be quite helpful. So we're going to go back to our run_robot.py file. And then here, we're going to define the information that we need in order to grab historical prices. And then we're going to get the stock frame set up as well. So the first thing is we need to define our date range. This is where I always get confused, because I have to recognize that the current point I'm at is technically the end date. So the end date in this situation is actually the today, in a sense. So it's date time today. So this is the endpoint for pulling data. So this is where I'm going to stop pulling it, but I need to define where I'm going to start pulling it. Well, I'm going to start, oh, misspelled it. I'm going to start pulling it at the end date minus, and then we have a time delta object, and we can specify I want 30 days ago. So I am going to stop pulling today, but I'm going to start pulling 30 days ago. That's how I think about it. I don't know if that's the best way, but that's how I mentally have to think about it. And then we're going to grab the historical prices. And so we're going to say historical prices equals, we're going to do trading robot, get historical prices, and then we're going to start passing through everything. So the start equals the start date. The end equals the end date. The bar size is 1. You don't technically have to put that in there because it's default value, but that's fine. And then finally, we have the bar type, and that's going to be minute. Again, this is the default value. You wouldn't technically have to pass it through. I'm not passing through symbol, so it's going to use whatever I specified up here and whatever I specify up here. And then once I have those historical prices, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add them to our data frame or our stock frame. So then convert the data into a stock frame. And so we'll say our stock frame equals our trading robot. There is a create stock frame method. It has one argument, which is data. I'm going to take the historical prices that I got from my previous line of code. And then I know this is a dictionary, and inside that dictionary, there is an aggregated key, and that returns the cleaned data. Again, just to clarify, it's all right here. Now we'll probably simplify this at some point, because again, I don't like necessarily having people to rely on keys because I never remember them. But for right now, this is kind of how it is set up. So what I'm going to show you is once we had the stock frame, I do want to print the head of the stock frame so that way you guys can see it. So we're going to say print the head of the stock frame. And so we're going to say pretty prints. There is a stock frame. And then in there is a frame property. This is an easy way of grabbing the data frame. And then there is a head. And then what I can do is I can set, maybe I want n to equal, I don't know, the first 20 rows, something like that, instead of the first 5. So let's see what we get. Hopefully it doesn't break. Oh, we have to talk about that too. I've had to fix that. Yeah, well, let me try this. Oh, wait, I think it's because I did the pretty print. I didn't do yeah, I know why. That was actually right. Sorry. It's because I need to do pretty print and then pretty print. Let's try again. 3rd time's a charm, right? I mean, that was a good sign. At least it didn't error out. That's the goal. Okay, perfect. So it looks like everything was organized. Very, very important to note, this is a multi-index data frame. It's very important to recognize this is a multi-index data frame. It hasn't been sorted, I think, right now. So, oh no, I think it has 4950. No, it hasn't been. So I don't think it's because I don't think we wrote it into there either. Maybe we did. Yeah, I think the sorting happens at the symbol level. I don't think we'll do it when we actually create the data frame. So, yeah, just be careful on that one right now because I think right now it's not sorting it. So that's done on the other one, so don't worry in that one. But this one, I don't actually explicitly sort it, so just keep that in mind. Yes, and then we need to talk about the date time stuff for the market stuff. So this one, I messed it up a little bit. So I actually learned we can do UTC now, and then we can get rid of all of this stuff. So we don't actually need this for the other ones. It actually makes it a little bit cleaner because I don't have to define as much. So that's always nice. I'm never going to complain about that. But this one actually makes it a little bit better because otherwise, it's not actually working consistently. This is actually one of the bigger challenges sometimes when you're working with this stuff, is you have to make sure that you're not assuming time zones, because that will get you into trouble sometimes, especially if your code is written. So like, say for example, I was writing it for specific standard time. Well, that's not good if the person who's using it is like on East Coast Standard Time, or they're in Europe or something like that, where they're using a whole different, where they're on a completely different time zone. And then all of a sudden I've just made it for specifically, Pacific Standard Time. Not really good to do that. So everything I do is in UTC, because I can't assume that the person is going to be in the same time zone that I am at. So all I've done is I've just done UTC now, got rid of the time zone information, and then this did the same thing down here. So ideally, it will work now. Okay, see, regular market is open, just like we were expecting. So that was this fix with that one. And then we can again see that that's still working. How long has this been going? 21 minutes. We'll start the trade thing. We'll just get it kind of started. So what we're going to do next is we're going to start defining our trade object. I think I defined that one. Yes, I did. I had to look for it really quickly. So we're going to go back to our robot file, and then we're going to fill out our create trade method. And so this one's a little bit longer, so we'll start with the arguments first. This has a few arguments. The first one is a trade ID. This is a string, and then this will allow us to uniquely identify our trade before it's been submitted. The reason why is before you submit an order, you don't actually have an order ID with it. So we're kind of faking it. We're just going to create one and then use it down the road. And then we're going to have another argument, enter or exit. And then this is determining whether you're entering or exiting a position. We have long or short. This again is defining whether that position is going to go long or short. So I can go short an instrument, or I can go long an instrument, and I can do the same when it comes to enter or exit. We're going to have order type. The order type will default to market. So right now, I'm just going to assume that you want a market order. You call this. And then we're going to have a few other arguments. One is the price. This will be a float, which will initialize to 0. And then we're going to have a stop limit price. This will also initialize as a float. That will equal 0, just like that. And there we go. So a lot of arguments, and then just to kind of make it a little bit easier to read. And then this will return a trade object. And then I don't think I've imported the trade module. I have not. So the next thing we need to do is we need to make sure we take our Pi robot. We know there's a trades module, and then we're just going to import the trade object, just like that. Perfect. Alrighty. So first things first, let's initialize a new trade object. And so what we'll do is we'll just call that trade, and that will equal a new trade object. And then we're going to create a new trade. And so we're going to say trade.newTrade. And then we're going to start filling out everything. So the trade ID, well, that's just going to equal the trade ID that we pass through. The order type is going to equal the order type that we pass through. The enter or exit, that will also equal the argument that we pass through. Long or short, that will equal the long or short argument that we pass through. We're going to have a price, which will equal the price. And then finally, we are going to have the stop limit price equal the stop limit price argument that you pass through. And then from here, we're going to have a dictionary for trades, where the key will be the trade ID that was passed through, and that will equal the trade object that was created. So a nice little collection of trade objects. And then finally, we will return this trade back to the user, just like that. So this is how we create a new trade object using our robot file. And then from here, let's create that new trade object. I think with this one, just because, well, let me see really quick before I didn't even print it. Let's do this, because I don't think I printed it, and I'm not going to try to remember that syntax because it was a mess. Yeah. we'll take this and we'll just kind of walk through it. Perfect. Not ideal, but nothing too crazy. Okay, so disregard this. We've already covered this. In our main run robot.py file, at some point we're going to create a new trade object, right? So we call our trading robot object. We know there is a create trade method. And then with this method, we just simply pass through the arguments it's asking for. So the first one was the trade ID. So this is something that is unique that you can use to assign yourself. At some point, if you don't actually pass anything through, no, I think it's a required one. So there might be, I highly doubt it, there might be where we'll kind of randomly generate a number. I personally don't like that. I rather have something that people kind of know from the ID what it's supposed to be doing. So I'm probably going to leave this as a required argument. And then the next argument is whether you're entering or exiting a position. So this one is going to enter one. I have it short, even though it's long. So I'm going to change that to long just to make it consistent. So this is going to go long a position. The order type is limit, and then I just put in a fake price of 150. Microsoft is nowhere near 150. And then there's a couple things that I do. So this is just demonstrating using certain functionality that we've built into this wonderful trade object. One of it is that you can make this order a good till cancel order. So I put in a time where it's basically going to cancel it immediately, but the cancel time is just date time now. So the time that is now. Personally, I would say take maybe this or take this and add 2 hours to it. So I'd say maybe something like time delta, and we'll just say, something like time delta, and then we'll say minutes. We'll just say like 90 minutes or something like that. So it's only good for the next 90 minutes. And then from here, we have another functionality that we're demonstrating. So modifying the session. Right now it does the regular market, but we're going to change it to the AM one. And then I add a new order leg to our particular order. So in this case, if I go to the instrument method, I can specify the symbol. So the symbol in this case is for Microsoft. And then I can specify things like the quantity and the asset type. Additionally, I can add a stop loss to my order. So this is saying it's going to be a stop loss that's 10 cents below the current price. And so the reason I know it's the current price and not like a percentage aspect is because I've specified that the percentage is false, meaning that when I calculate my stop loss, I don't want it to be a percentage of the price. I want it to be an absolute value, so like a numeric dollar value. So I'm saying 10 cents below the price that we're going to be submitting it at. And then here I just simply print it out. So that wasn't all the functionality, and this definitely has room to improve. Creating orders is a challenge because it's hard to make it simple because there's often so many ways to do it. And so it's just going to take time to kind of build in that functionality and make it more intuitive. But for right now, certain functionality does exist. I will say don't get too committed to it because it's probably going to change a lot. However, I do want you to kind of get comfortable with this idea that you might not necessarily be defining the entire order right from the get-go, but you'll be kind of defining different parts of it. So that kind of has its own advantages and disadvantages. One advantage is it might be more lines of code, but it might be more intuitive and it might give you some more functionality that you might not necessarily have if you were just pre-populating that dictionary. Okay, and then all we're going to do here is I'm going to print out that order. So let's see what this looks like. Okay, perfect. That still works. Oh, what happened? In create trade, oh, maybe I got an unexpected keyword argument long. Oh, maybe it's because it's possible. It's very, very possible. It's because I didn't put it in here. That's why. I changed it. That's not good. I hope I didn't break anything. That should be fine, but we'll see in a second. We'll see what happens. Welcome to the world of coding. Things never work as intended. Let's look at the next one. Order instructions. 54. 54, 54, 54. Long or short. You know what I probably could do? So this is the nice thing about Visual Studio Code. I mean, a lot of this has it is there's linting, which definitely makes your life easier. When I do this, I like to also turn on pylint. I don't know why, it just seems to work better. And then what it's going to do is it's going to look through everything and see if it's all things once it does its little refresh and stuff like that. Sometimes you have to refresh the window to see it, but we'll keep it like this, I think, for right now, and we'll see what happens. It didn't give me any errors, so I'm going to assume that's a good thing. Okay, perfect. So that's how it's supposed to work. And you can see that we now have an order object. So that's useful as well too. And it's modified all the stuff that we were talking about. We have our order leg. We now know it's a good till cancel. So again, it's never going to be perfect at this stage, but it's helping you building that process. So for example, we now have our stop loss, which is 10 cents below our purchase price that was set here. So it's trying to take the steps necessary to make your life easier. There's still a lot of work to be done with it, but I'm happy with the direction it's taking. This is something, if people have suggestions, I'm all open to hearing this one. I personally this is a complex one, and I'm more than happy to hear opinions on ways to simplify it, because I know there's ways to simplify it. And I know some people have kind of worked on this too. I'd be curious to see what other people have, because you never know. I mean, like I said, I'm just one way of looking at it. I'm not even going to say it's the right way, but at least it's a way. But just to kind of see what people would come up with, I think you'd hear some pretty good stuff. Okay, I've taken more than enough time. So at this point, if you have any questions, by all means, put them down in the comments below. In the next video, we're going to start building an indicator. And then with that indicator, we are going to mimic getting quotes throughout the day. I'm not going to promise you that any signals will be generated, but I will walk you through getting the latest bar, adding that to the data frame, refreshing your indicators, and then doing things like checking signals and stuff like that. So that's what's going to come up in the next video. However, for this video, if you have any questions or comments, put them down below. Otherwise, we'll see you in video number 14.